Donald Trump has officially thrown Attorney General Pam Bondi out the door, ending the political career of one of his most loyal allies with a single, cold-blooded decision. There is no room for pleasantries here. The truth is unfolding right in the heart of the White House. Pam Bondi was ousted because she failed to weaponize the Justice Department to destroy James Comey and Letitia James under the president's personal orders for retribution. Worse still, the clumsy cover-up to seal the sensitive Jeffrey Epstein files ignited a storm of public outrage, stripping away her last shred of protective value. Trump is furious, panicking, and Todd Blanch, an obedient personal defense attorney, was immediately propped up as acting attorney general to replace her.
Coming on the air with breaking news, President Trump has apparently fired his Attorney General Pam Bondi, according to a senior administration official and a source familiar with the matter. This comes after NBC News learned that the president has grown frustrated with his Attorney General in recent days, according to multiple sources.
Just minutes later, on a different media front, Fox News, the administration's traditional safe haven, scrambled onto the airwaves for damage control. Reporter Peter Doocy awkwardly relayed the whitewash directives from the White House.
This department, and the president said he was preparing some remarks. We think that it is going to be the official announcement about the Attorney General Bondi leaving the Justice Department. She will not be leaving the administration. They are going to find a different job for her. So President Trump thinks that she did a good job. President Trump still likes her, but at this time, he feels like Todd Blanch should be elevated in an interim role. So the plan, at least as of the last couple minutes, and a lot of things are changing.
The contrast here is the perfect definition of the art of political deception. One side calls this a firing born of extreme frustration. The other uses the smoothest words possible to pacify the public. No bad blood, still likes her, will find a different job. Ladies and gentlemen, no head of state strips one of the most powerful seats in America from a longtime ally simply because they want to rotate. Personnel throwing up a smokescreen that Pam Bondi did a good job is a classic psychological manipulation tactic. It's designed to save face in a humiliating breakup, preventing the former head of the Justice Department from turning on them and becoming a hostile witness, holding countless lethal White House secrets. The brutal reality is, when a tool can no longer serve the darkest ambitions, it is mercilessly discarded. A dull blade in the war of retribution and the weaponization of justice. To understand why the president was so frustrated that he had to take down his loyal ally, we must look straight into the nature of the Attorney General role through the lens of this administration. NBC News bravely pinpointed the root cause of this anger.
Trump term. And this, in many ways, comes down to a representation of the frustration that President Trump has, that his vision for how he could exact retribution against political rivals and those who had, in his perception, done him wrong at some past point, to be brought to justice. That has not happened, even though this Department of Justice under Pam Bondi has attempted to do so in a number of areas where we've seen the failed attempts to prosecute James Comey or Letitia James.
This is not a conspiracy theory. This is reality being reported on national television. The sacred boundary of independence, the firewall separating the White House and the DOJ, has been completely leveled. Pam Bondi wasn't chosen to be a defender of the Constitution. She was chosen to be an executioner, someone expected to turn the highest law enforcement agency into the president's personal weapon. The White House has a clear blacklist. James Comey, Letitia James, and those who dare to stand up and resist. Pam Bondi took the order and tried to cobble together cases steeped in personal vendettas. But the legal system, fortunately, still has certain guardrails against blatant manipulation. The DOJ's failure wasn't for lack of trying to lock up Democrats. It was because those charges were so weak and baseless that they couldn't make it past the courthouse doors. The inability to satisfy the president's thirst for revenge was the death sentence for Pam Bondi's career. And the most chilling evidence of this illegal interference was leaked, as NBC News revealed.
And there was a message posted some months ago in which he seemed to and appeared to post what was meant to be a private message that started with the word Pam, and had a directive about actions that he wanted to see her take on when it came to potential indictments for people that he wanted to see happen in a faster way with more of an urgency to it.
The leaked message starting with Pam, followed by a cold colon, is a directive from a man who views the law as a personal toy, issuing direct orders, forcing the Attorney General to expedite the prosecution of specific individuals. According to the president's wishes, is a severe violation of ethical standards. It exposes a system rotting from its core, transformed into a machine serving autocratic power. The Epstein ticking time bomb. The hoax of the century that blew up the AG's seat. If the war against political rivals was a smoldering fire, the scandal surrounding the Jeffrey Epstein files was the explosive charge that completely incinerated Pam Bondi's credibility. Here, Fox News, surprisingly, provided the most fatal details exposing the hypocrisy and public deception. Reporter David Spunt traced the timeline that unmasked this charade.
She comes into office February 2025, and then a few weeks later, in an interview with John Roberts, I believe it was during this hour on Fox News with John and Sandra, said the Epstein files were on her desk, or the files were on her desk when she was asked about the Epstein files. She later clarified and said that she meant the JFK files, the RFK files, the Martin Luther King files, as well as the Epstein files. But there were so many more questions just about the overall handling of the Justice Department dealing with the Epstein.
Look at how they manipulate public psychology. They promise to bring light to the dirtiest corners of the ultra-rich, fabricating a populist image that they were fighting for vulnerable victims. Bondi boldly declared the files were on her desk, but immediately after, a pathetic cover-up occurred. She hastily corrected herself, equating a modern-day sex abuse case with decades-old historical mysteries like JFK or Martin Luther King in an attempt to dilute the public heat. Why would the most powerful agency back down from a case that would clean up the worst elite garbage? Are their names too big, too close to the current administration? Sitting on that list, the even more horrifying truth continued to be exposed.
Bondi. Over the summer, DOJ put out a release and they said that there would be nothing further warranted from the Epstein files. No charges would be filed. The case is essentially closed. And then Deputy Attorney General, now I guess we could call him Interim Attorney General Todd Blanch, met with Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's former girlfriend and co-conspirator, convicted co-conspirator. So the story never fully went away. In fact, Bondi was supposed to testify before Congress in a deposition about Epstein on April 14th, in just a couple of weeks. So she clearly will no longer have to do that.
The decision to close the file without a single charge is a slap in the face to those demanding justice. And the most gruesome detail, Todd Blanch, the man just propped up to replace Bondi, is the exact person who met with Ghislaine Maxwell, the notorious co-conspirator. The Justice Department, instead of prosecuting Epstein's network, was negotiating with its ringleaders. This is the key to decoding the purge. Congress was furious and subpoenaed Pam Bondi to testify on April 14th. By executing Bondi right at this moment, the White House extinguished the risk of her telling the truth under oath before a bipartisan committee. They didn't fire her because she failed her duties. They fired her to silence a risky witness, preventing a PR disaster that could burn down the entire administration just before the midterms. To clearly see the cold-blooded ruthlessness of the political elite, let's combine the testimonies of both Kelly O'Donnell, NBC, and Shannon Bream, Fox News, regarding the scene that played out just 24 hours before the firing sentence was handed down. This
in a back seat, and she was in the seat with him yesterday, going in the beast, as it's known, the presidential limousine, to the Supreme Court to listen to one of the key ideas of his time in office, which is birthright citizenship that he wants to challenge. Apparently, she was unable to save herself in those personal, direct moments with.
Yeah, I mean, I was sitting there. I saw them, and everybody looked very chummy. It was her along with Secretary Lutnick sitting with the president, very dialed in. Obviously, this birthright citizenship, a huge issue for the president, one of his first executive orders, a very big issue for him legally. For him to show up as the first sitting president telegraphed a lot of weight on this argument yesterday. And so they were sitting there together, clearly as his top law enforcement officer, as the Attorney General. She was a part of that A-list bench that was there together. And they looked very chummy. At one point, there was actually some passing of notes. And you wouldn't have, from seeing them together in court yesterday, imagined that there was something that there was this close to being.
This is a scene more chilling than any mafia movie. Pam Bondi rode in the armored vehicle, the Beast, the ultimate symbol of power. She appeared on the A-list bench at the Supreme Court, laughing and passing notes with the president in front of the whole world to defend the executive order, stripping birthright citizenship. She seemed to still be at the pinnacle of power, enjoying the privileges of a close courtier. She had no idea her political death warrant had already been signed. Those social smiles were just anesthetics before the blade came down. Firing a loyalist so abruptly, stripping away all their dignity, shows the current balance of power operates on paranoia and impulse. The closer you appear to be, the easier it is to be eliminated at the moment you least expect it. Loyalty is no longer a shield. It becomes a fatal weakness, ultimate threat. Bondi's departure paves the way for the rise of Todd Blanch, and this is the true death knell for the independence of the American judiciary. Fox News made no secret of this man's background.
Cases. So this was a situation in which the president really has resisted a lot of high turnover in his cabinet. Of course, some weeks ago, we did see the DHS secretary, former Secretary Kristi Noem, fired from her position before former senator, now the new DHS Secretary Markwayne Mullin, was put into place. And that had been the first actual cabinet secretary that was ousted and then replaced. So Pam Bondi will be the second in a very, very critical role here, as she has been involved in many of the very urgent matters and situations that the president has been dealing with, from everything on national security to, again, some of these more local and domestic investigations that he wanted her to pursue.
Todd Blanch is no warrior defending the Constitution. He is Donald Trump's personal defense attorney. He is the man who untangled the president's dirtiest private scandals. Promoting a private attorney to be the head of the nation's law enforcement agency is an act that completely shatters the boundary between state and private interests. This is the absolute peak of conflict of interest. The arrival of Blanch, a man who once met with Ghislaine Maxwell, guarantees that the Justice Department will now officially morph into the private law firm of the president's family, a machine ready to use taxpayer money to protect allies, cover up the Epstein files, and crush any political opponent standing in the way. The White House no longer needs a weak gatekeeper like Pam Bondi. They need a ruthless henchman who stops at nothing. Pam Bondi is not the only victim, and certainly won't be the last. The prior departure of Kristi Noem and now Bondi shows the executive branch is in a state of continuous purge. They are desperately searching for pieces willing to break every final limit. This is not just the end of Pam Bondi. It is a damning indictment of a democracy eroding from within, where the truth is distorted, loyalty is exploited, and the legal system is trampled to serve a single ego. We will continue to monitor this event closely because its shockwaves will completely alter the American political landscape in the time to come.